Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining our little discussion today. Collaborative, interdisciplinary exchanges are the best way to solve the most complex problems in the world. Now, I'm not saying we're going to solve our industry's troubles here today in one afternoon, but this is a step in the right direction. I'd like to thank our presenters. I know how difficult it is to be able to get away from the grind of it, but I hope through our investment in time, we will provide returns for the industry we all love. Before we kick off, we just want to say thank you to the Construction Cloud for having us. The Construction Cloud is a group of companies founded by PlanGrid. We're dedicated to accelerating the productivity of the construction industry through the adoption of technology and integration. They clearly care a lot about today's topics, so we just want to say thank you to DeWalt, EarthCam, eSub, PlanGrid, Roombex, SkyCatch, SmartBid for making this webinar possible. Good people are the key to construction. We're not in the numbers-driven industry. We're in a people-driven industry. I talk to my friends and colleagues around the globe, and they tell me they're all having trouble finding good people, whether it be for craft positions or for management. And with the pending retirement of the baby boomers, there's every indication that this problem is only going to continue to get worse. Ken, can you use your big brain and give us some industry insight on this? Ken, are you there? All right, we're having a little technical problem.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hello.
Ken.
Great, okay. Construction spending and employment have been rising faster than the overall economy for the last few years. The growth rate has been trending down recently. Construction employment, for instance, rose just 1.8% in the last 12 months, from July of 2016 to July of 2017. But that masks some big differences. Private residential employment has been growing at double-digit rates. Private non-residential, which had been growing pretty strongly until recently, has suddenly turned negative. Public construction has been negative for quite some time. So it may sound as if the industry has really hit its peak and is about to decline. But I think that masks what's going on with employment. Employment has also slowed down recently, but it's still, the industry is adding jobs at nearly double the rate of the overall economy, 2.8% in the last 12 months. And when you peel back the onion and find out what's happening in different non-residential segments, you can see quite a different pattern. It's true that the overall change in public and private non-residential construction together has been flat for the first 7 months of this year compared to the first 7 months of last year. But as you scan down the column of different segments, as shown on slide 3, you see that there's a mix of growing and shrinking segments. My forecast for the full year and for 2018 is that we will have modest overall growth in total non-residential construction, but continue to have a mix of public and private gains and losses depending on the segment. Now, clearly, with the hurricanes that we've had in the last 2 weeks, that will make a change in some of these segments. We'll have to see a lot more going into reconstruction of homes, schools, and other public buildings, some private buildings, and perhaps some infrastructure. But I don't think the net increase in construction is going to be very great, because a lot of those projects will be replacing ones that would have happened that aren't going to go ahead now. When you look by region, as shown on on slide 4, you can see that construction activity has been rising in most of the country. From July of last year to July of this year, 36 states added construction jobs, And as I mentioned, overall construction employment rising faster than it is for the total non-farm payroll sector. However, a number of these pink states, meaning ones that had small declines, or light green states with relatively small increases in construction employment, they would have a brighter green shade if contractors were able to find enough workers. AGC of America does a survey every year about construction employment, and our latest survey found that 70% of firms were having trouble filling jobs. This is consistent with data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shown on slide 5, in which construction hires have stayed relatively flat for the last 7 years, but job openings have gone from under 100,000 to well over 200,000, meaning that companies are having to advertise jobs for longer before they fill them. A reason for that is that the number of people with construction experience who are currently unemployed has dwindled from over 1.5 million just at the end of the recession to a series low of less than 500,000. And so basically contractors are having to keep jobs open for longer, perhaps take longer to complete a job, or they're having to work with less experienced workers. An inevitable consequence is that wages are starting to go up somewhat faster than they were in the last 7 years. I mentioned the AGC survey. The results of that are captured in slide 6, hardest positions to fill. There are a wide variety of craft positions that contractors are having trouble filling. The toughest, carpenters. The National Association of Home Builders has done similar surveys, and carpenters always come out on top there. But electricians, bricklayers, plumbers, concrete workers all had half or more of the firms that employ those workers saying they were having trouble filling that. And on the salaried side, 48% said they're having trouble finding project managers, about a third to a quarter, estimators and engineers. What are firms doing about that? In slide 7, you can see that half the firms said that they were raising base pay for hourly workers, specifically to attract or retain them. About a quarter were providing incentives or bonuses. A fifth were increasing contributions to existing benefit plans or introducing new ones. Nearly half the firms are paying overtime hours, presumably because they don't have enough skilled workers to complete the work, or they're using those workers to train newcomers. About 46% are engaging in in-house training, and where they can find them, more are turning to subcontractors. What we're not seeing very much of, at least among the 1,600 respondents among AGC members, is use of labor-saving equipment, tools, and machinery. Only 22% of the firms said they were turning more to that. 15% to lean construction, just 11% to off-site prefabrication, and 7% to virtual construction methods such as building information modeling. Frankly, I was surprised these percentages were so low, and that they just about match what we had a year ago, because I do think that it's inevitable that firms are going to have to turn to these labor-saving and productivity-enhancing methods more. To close, you can see on slide 8 that the cost of construction inputs, that's the goods that go into every type of construction, as well as items consumed by contractors such as diesel fuel, were dropping for a long period. By the middle of last year, they started turning positive, spiked at the beginning of this year, now increasing at about a 2 to 3% rate. Wages also rising more than 2%, whereas the producer price index for non-residential buildings, that is what contractors would charge to put up a mix of non-residential buildings, only going up about 1% a year. So that says contractors' margins are being squeezed, and the only way that they can continue in business is to get more productivity out of the workers they have. And therefore, I think that we are on the cusp of seeing a substantial growth in productivity enhancing investment. To wrap up, my summary for 2017 and 2018 shows modest to moderate growth in total spending. led by private residential spending. This is on slide 9. Private non-residential spending definitely slowing down but staying positive. Public construction has taken quite a hit, and next year might grow slightly, but it could shrink a little bit again. The costs, as I mentioned, of both goods and services, such as subcontractor services, leased equipment, and other services, starting to rise more rapidly, getting to the 3 to 4% range, more than we've seen in the last decade, but not runaway like we had from 2004 to 2008. And similarly, employment costs beginning to pick up a little bit more. So let me turn it back to you at this point.
Ken, wow, that's some great information. I'm sure that'll give everyone at home some points to think over and some numbers to run when they get back to their offices. One of the top labor shortages, you think, everyone would be working as efficiently as possible. But there's a lot of examples where the productivity isn't at its optimal on the job site. When it comes down to it, construction is 3 very simple things: communication, coordination, and execution. But I'm sure everyone listening at home has had an experience, whether on one job or on many, where one simple failure in one of those 3 things has caused major issues for the project and everyone involved. John, can you give us some of your insights on this?
Sure, thanks, Kip. If you'd go to that slide there, the productivity in the construction industry, it's really discouraging if you look at this over the last 20 years, 30 years. Actually, you could go all the way back to almost the 50s, that construction has been flat to slightly down in productivity over that time period. And all other industrial segments, whether it's information technology, manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, many other industrial segments have had a significant rise in productivity measured really on any kind of metric. And so we really have to start thinking through, as Ken described, an alternative set of approaches to dealing with this lack of construction productivity because we're starting to weigh down many of the other industries. Go ahead to the next slide, Kip. So some of the top problem areas, and I'm sure folks on the webinar have seen this and probably could list many others, but I just listed a few here. Complicated site logistics is one that is often cited that we could be able to solve with offsite prefabrication or offsite assembly and bring a closer to a final product that we could hook into the existing system on site, or obviously by better field coordination. Oftentimes on projects, we'll see inefficient integration and team collaboration amongst companies, and that leads to the 3rd bullet of siloed behavior, either within a project team or even within companies, various disciplines inside a company or various parts of a company leading to conflicts in the field. Change orders and changes that are made, whether they're owner-driven or field condition-driven, are often not adequately communicated. One of the things that Kip talked about, communication being a very key attribute to well-run projects. We as an industry are very slow to adapt technology and automation solutions, which are one of the primary ways that many of the other industrial segments that have seen those productivity improvements have implemented over the last 10 or 20 years. And that's really, I think, the genesis of a webinar like this, is to say, folks, we can do better if we can adopt some things that have been tried and true in other industries and apply those to the work of construction. Material management and inventory on many sites and many projects is a difficult endeavor. And then lack of implementing productivity improvement, as Ken mentioned, things like productivity enhancing tools or methods like lean construction are really at the lower part of that Pareto that he showed for how people are dealing with labor shortages. And we really need to be thinking in the current climate and moving forward how we can start to invest in those more heavily moving forward. Next slide, please, Kip. So one of the things that I bring to this particular webinar, I retired last summer after 34 years working for Intel Corporation, but I was also, in the time I was the general manager for global construction for Intel, was also on the board of the Lean Construction Institute. And so I wanted to share very briefly research results that the Lean Construction Institute, in conjunction with a couple other groups, have done in the past couple years, and some of the results that they're seeing across the country. And really the punchline, I'll start with that and then just briefly touch a couple of the high points, is that projects that have a high lean intensity, and I'll describe that toward the end of these 3 or 4 slides, are significantly more likely to be coming in ahead of schedule and under budget, which are the 2 primary business metrics that almost any owner that we surveyed would view as the most important. Next slide, please. And this was the actual research overview. The first one was done by folks at Dodge Analytics, and it was 81 different owners surveyed across the industrial segments that you can see at the bottom left in that pie chart, and 2 projects for each one of those owners. And we asked to get their best project. They, as the owner, got to define what best meant for them in their business, and then what their average project was. And we did a lot of data analysis, and led by the Dodge folks, to differentiate what made it best from average. The second one, which I won't really talk to today, but is available on the Lean Construction Institute website, is a separate study done by Renee Chang out of the University of Minnesota on what led to success in integrated projects, because that's a new delivery mechanism that is becoming more prevalent across the country. And she studied 10 specific projects and really tried to understand why those integrated projects were more successful. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the Dodge Analytic results. Next page, please. Really, the first big takeaway of the Dodge Analytics is how important team dynamics are, and onboarding people effectively into the project team is. And you can see blue is the best projects, orange is the average projects, and you can see a 6x difference, 7x, 8x difference between what the best projects have versus what the average projects have. And the way I explain this to folks is, no professional sports team, you can pick which team you want to talk about or sport you want to talk about, would ever go into a championship game with never having run plays, never done a preseason, never having people know each other. But in construction, we seem to think that's okay and normal to throw people together and hope for the best. And what this data results show is that it clearly is very beneficial for the best projects, and many owners see those best projects where the team puts energy into building the team and working together as a group of people in a collaborative manner. Next slide, please. The second big takeaway of this research is how profound the difference is in the best projects of when they actually onboard and hire all of the key stakeholders. And so across the x-axis here is when people in part of the business case through the design process would be onboarded or hired. And what this data shows, again, blue is best, orange is typical, that 75% plus of the best projects hire everybody that's going to work on the project, the electrical contractor, mechanical contractor, general contractor, all the specialty trades, at the time design starts, so that they can be part of the design process and influence that design. Design is not something that A&E firms should do on their own. It's something they should do in conjunction with the well-informed people who are actually going to put that work in the field. And if they do that in a collaborative manner, the data shows that it's significantly more effective. Next page, please. The third key takeaway is really the contracting type, which is on the right, and the delivery method, which is on the left. We just listed 4 of the more common delivery methods on the left, but you can see that the best projects, there are 2 delivery methods, both of which are more collaborative: an integrated project delivery and a design build methodology, where best projects are more prevalent using one of those 2 delivery methods. You can get a best project in any delivery method, but if you want to increase your probability of success, you would use a more collaborative approach, is what the data on the left shows. And then the data on the right is really the the commercial terms of that. And again, the data is pretty compelling that a cost reimbursable with some type of shared savings is a significantly different result as far as having best projects that are using that type of approach. So it's really about how do we support the team with a contract versus the contract as a way of trying to move risk to somebody else. Next slide, please. And then I think the last one that I had in this particular deck is really how does the team learn as a group of people? And this is 8 of the more prevalent or common lean techniques and methods. Again, I talked about lean intensity. These are many of the more prevalent best projects, lean practices on the things like co-location, where it's a structural way of getting everybody to talk together, collaborate with each other, have a visual representation of the data in a common way. Target value design, again, is a way of getting all of the participants in a project to work collaboratively together as the design process comes through, and then things like prefabrication and others. But if folks are interested in becoming more effective or more efficient in a project, these are ones that are the most prevalent or would add the most value based on the research that we've done to date. Next slide, please. And then I'll turn it back over to you, Kip.
John, that's some great information. We just covered, I can't appreciate it enough how much that means. What can we as the construction industry do with the knowledge to improve productivity across the industry that we just went over? How can we learn to stop beating our heads against this wall? Chris, can you give us some ideas or at least give me some aspirin?
Sure, Kip, absolutely. Yeah, hopefully you guys are taking a look at this right now, and a few of you are getting a little bit of a chuckle out of it, because this is BIM in the field, right? One of the biggest challenges that we need to address, in addition to not actually having enough workers on the job site and not having enough trained personnel, is taking all of these ideas, these concepts of working in a lean methodology in the last planner system, and actually getting them into the hands of the people physically doing the work on the projects. Unfortunately, I heard a statistic that stated that a little bit less than 34% of the time that workers spend on the job site is actually spent at the workface, physically making work happen. And the remainder of that time is spent searching for information, searching for tools, searching for materials, meetings, just travel time across the job site. So anything that we can do to help improve the amount of time that people are actually physically putting work in place, whether it be through communication, collaboration, or just having the information more readily available to them at their fingertips, is extremely valuable. Now, I'm not too proud to say that this picture was actually taken on one of my job sites. I thought it was actually a good thing, because it actually did show that the technology was making it to the field. It was not the best technological solution to get that information out to the field, but at least the foreman had the wherewithal to go into the trailer or go to the kiosk, pull up the BIM model, get navigated to a view that he was looking at, and then take that back out and get it to his guys in the field. That's where we need to focus on, making sure workers have that information at their fingertips where they're actually working, and that is so incredibly critical. And I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen over the last several years is mobile technology, right? The growth of tablets and phablets and just phones that are capable of actually doing the work. And almost everybody has them. I mean, you walk around a job site at lunchtime, 75 to 85% of the guys are sitting on their phones, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Pinterest. So we know that they have the technology available to them. Let's get the information that they need onto that technology and allow for them to collaborate back with the office. That's a key factor, is not just having the information, but be able to ask questions and interact with those who may not physically be on the job site. It's a chance or an opportunity for us to plan our work, understanding how we interact with other trades, how each worker is going to interact with someone else who may be working in his area, so that we can be efficient and effective when we're planning our work and actually making it happen in the job. That's one of the biggest things when we talk about lean, is planning your work ahead of time so you have the right materials, you have a good plan in place, and you're not going to run into any roadblocks when you're out there, so you can have good continuous flow. And that will allow us to go ahead and improve our productivity and hopefully make up for some of that lack of maybe manpower that we have. Kip, if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide. So we've started to see some of this technology hit the job site a little bit more frequently with mobile devices such as iPads and mobile phones. And there's a slew of solutions out there for apps to be able to handle the communication that needs to happen between the job site worker and their home office and the general contractor and the design team. We're starting to use tools like FaceTime and Google Hangouts as a way to communicate problems, because it's a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, video must be worth an infinite number of words, because we can actually interact with someone and show them the specific issue that we're having. And that's where solutions like being able to put job site Wi-Fi on a project are becoming so incredibly interesting to so many organizations, because that allows us to communicate that much more frequently. And fortunately, we have solution providers that are working on that right now and have solutions that are growing into the market. And one of them, I think, is even a sponsor here today. So I think this provides us a ton of opportunity to improve collaboration, make sure that people have the information that they need and can get that information and data back to the office, so the decision makers can make those decisions in a timely manner and not lose valuable time trying to figure out solutions to problems in the field where the decision makers are not. And it allows us to plan and interact with other trades, understand what others are doing and what the plan of attack is for that day, for that week, and that allows us to be more effective and more efficient. Now, I think Kip's going to talk a little bit more about, where some of these technologies are helping us with our productivity. Kip?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Great presentation. What technologies can we integrate to help our productivity? As one of my old bosses would say to me all the time, show me what that little magic box can do. John, you want to give us your thoughts?
Sure. I think just as Chris talked about, technology can clearly be a driver for productivity in construction. Just like the graph we showed earlier, it's been a major driver of productivity in almost every other industrial segment, and we are late to the game in really applying that technology in construction. But as he showed, there is a lot of offerings that are out there, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. So I think we're really at the cusp of a major shift in the ability of using technology in the construction industry. Now, my perspective, having been an owner for a large number of years, that technology investments really have to be fully integrated on projects, though, to take full advantage of that. And what I mean by that, and I'll use the first one as an example, BIM, information modeling is clearly, virtual construction, clearly a potential breakthrough for us as an industry. But my experience as I started down this path with Intel using that type of technology is we saw many cases where we as an owner actually invested quite a bit in technology for our supply partners, but we were unable, at least at the beginning, to get the full value of that, because our design partner would have one set of models, our general contracting partners would have another type of model or platform, our trade partners each had their detailing specific type of platform. And so it wasn't until we really got to the point where it was an integrated solution that we could use all the way from design all the way through fabrication of spool drawings or things of that nature, that we started to see the true benefit of what a technology like BIM could go do. So my encouragement, advice, plea, I guess, for folks that are attending the webinar is to really try to, when you bring technology into projects, really try to bring it in in an integrated fashion so that all the companies that are working on that project can use a similar platform such that we can really reap the benefits of that technology. There are second bullet here, and I'm sure there are many, many others, but I've started to see working with a number of mechanical contractors around the country in the consulting work I'm doing now. The advent of bending machines is a really huge enabler for shifting away from actually having to do field welds in the stick-build environment. So I think we will see many, many more automation solutions just like those bending machines that will come into play where we can get a 5x, 10x productivity improvement to offset that lack of workforce that was mentioned as Ken started the presentation today. And then the last one, again, from the perspective I've been a part of for much of my working career, is there are many, many software platforms, and many of the hosts today are people who work through software platforms, but they are allowing multiple companies to use a similar system such that individual companies don't have to go invest in them. We can invest in them as a group of people or invest on it as a project. But again, it allows an integrated solution if we do that well. And it could go from how we do time management in the field. It could go to how we track change orders. It could go to how we do accounting system, input and output of costs. I mean, there are tons of different software and apps that are now starting to come out into the marketplace. But again, my plea is that we try to apply those in a manner in which all of the parties that are on a project can actually leverage them together in a collaborative manner to get the benefit for all parties, the owner as well as the supply partners.
John, I think that's a great point, and one thing I would add to that is I don't necessarily think it's as important that everybody use the same system, but everybody's working on the same data set. And if we can pass that data and information back and forth together and collaborate upon it, I think that's where the real power comes. Because we use the tools that are most beneficial to each of us as an individual, but we're not double entering that data, and that's I think where a lot of that productivity and value come.
You're absolutely right. It isn't required that it is the same platform, but the fact that it's a single data entry and the data can flow across systems, and you're not doing 10 versions of the truth. You got a single version of the truth with the same set of data is really where the power is. You're exactly correct. Thank you for that add.
John and Chris, are you guys telling me that if we're baking a cake together, we should be using the same recipe and the same language? I mean, what a novel idea.
I know that sounds crazy, right?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, I think it is a novel idea in the context of what is the norm today in the construction industry. But as I showed back on that best projects, there are plenty of projects around the country that are using that, as you said, novel approach to get people to work together in a more collaborative approach, working together toward a common end versus kind of our siloed behavior that has become kind of the standard or norm set in much of the industry. So it doesn't seem like rocket science. It probably isn't rocket science. And many people are starting to use that, but it is still not the norm in our industry. So I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you very much, John. Great information. Thank you, Chris, for your insight. All right, I'm going to fill in here on the field perspective because I can guarantee you of about the 400 people who are watching at home and the panelists, you probably have under 10 superintendents who hung their boots up and are sitting here trying to thumb through it. So I'm going to give you the field perspective. Everything comes down to the KISS rule, digital automation. Keep it simple, stupid. We have super smart people in this industry, some of the smartest people in the world. They can solve any problem, and we tend to overthink things. So we have to keep our solutions when it comes to integration of technology to the simplest denominator so we can execute it in the most efficient manner possible. Integrating technologies should augment your existing processes and systems. Everybody out there has folks in their industry who've been executing the work in the same manner using the existing systems and processes that they have had for 40, 50, 60 years sometimes. we have to look at how we can integrate technology into augment the performance and capabilities of those subject matter experts out there, boots on the ground, getting the work in place. I want everyone at home to remember that if you're not putting work in place with your two hands, then you're overhead. And as overhead, us managers, we need to do the best we can to make our people and teams work better, smarter, so that we cover our own overhead burden. Chris,
Thanks,
you want to
Kip.
weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to comment on your integrating technology to augment our existing workflows. I think sometimes we need to challenge some of our existing workflows as well, because I think sometimes technology will provide us with an opportunity that will allow us to completely revamp a workflow that we may have, and we shouldn't be afraid to explore those opportunities. I'm not saying that jump down that chute right away, but you know, one of the big lean methodologies is to look outside the box and kind of come up with new ways that may not have been the way we've done things for the last 30 or 40 or 50 years, but may provide a more continuous flow, and they may not be so logical. Like sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, and I say that and people sometimes cringe, but it is very true. And I challenge everybody to not just support technology to augment your existing workflows, but sometimes investigate technology that may disrupt your current workflow, because there may be opportunities to improve, you know, 10x versus 2 or 3x in some of those opportunities. And I think one of the things that does that, and I'm bringing a little bit more of an office perspective. I am one of those overhead guys for sure, without a doubt. I'm not physically putting work in place. Yeah.
Yeah, this is John. Just let me tag on that before you go to the office perspective, and I want to share an example I've seen of a disruptive technology and using that technology that folks showed earlier, whether it's a tablet or a phone. The RFI process is a standard ritual that we go through in the construction industry of writing down, I don't understand something when I'm ready to go put in place, or I have a better idea, and I turn that paper back into my company, who then takes it over to another company, and then they take that down to the engineer who needed to deal with it, et cetera, et cetera. But just with the example that was shown earlier, the ability to actually do videos or take pictures and talk to people live that are not physically at the workplace can completely disrupt that RFI traditional flow, and you can get many questions asked and answered without ever actually having to fill out any paperwork. So that I just wanted to expound upon, Chris, your thinking of some of the workflows, and I by the way, I agree with Kip's general premise of start with your existing workflow, but the technology does, in some cases, allow us to completely do the work differently, and we ought to try to take advantage of that. So just wanted to add that.
No, I couldn't agree more, John. And I think a big portion of that has to do sometimes we are handcuffed in a way by our contractual obligations and trying to fulfill that contractual obligation. So like you stated before, if we can come up with more collaborative contractual obligations, then sometimes that paves the way for new technology to be able to take place and truly disrupt some of those solutions. You know, this is the field job site of today. It's no longer stacks of drawings. It's now 2, 3, 4 computer screens, and this is the superintendent's desk. This is not now granted, he's not sitting here right now because he's probably walking around in the field with his iPad, but he's really looking for ways to communicate information with his design team, with his field workers, and all that is coming through, you know, the cloud and ways that we're sharing and collaborating information in a much more efficient way. It's all about bridging that information from folks in offices to the folks in the field physically doing the work. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is have somebody put something in place that is based on incorrect or old information. And we want to make sure that that data can be accessed easily and efficiently, no matter what system anybody is using. And that was the point I was making earlier on John's statement, is we should have solutions that allow people to work on many different platforms, on many different services that tie into the same data, so that we can leverage that and allow other people to leverage that and stop being inefficient by having to double and triple enter things. And anything we can do to expedite that data collection is going to lead to increased productivity. And that all makes sense because the more data that we can collect from the field, the more observations we can make from that data, and the better decisions we can make on our business practices. Are we actually hitting our productivity expectations? You know, things like plan % complete, which is a big lean thing for tracking. You know, if we don't get data back from the field and we don't collect it in an efficient manner, then we can't understand if we actually are hitting the goals that we've set for ourselves. And that's very important from an office perspective because we can't be everywhere. So we need as many data collectors out in the field using the technology that they have available to them to pass that information back to us and really determine whether or not we're hitting the mark and whether or not we're keeping up with things so that we can adjust our plan if we're not. Kip, you want to go ahead and ask a little bit of a couple questions? I think we have a few more things to talk about on what we're going to do in the future, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Chris. Great presentation, great information. Thanks for jumping in there, John. What steps does the industry need to take to make this vision a reality? And I'm talking for real right now, boots on the ground. I'm not talking on paper. I'm not talking in a whiteboard in somebody's executive office. I mean, how can we integrate this into really fixing the way that we execute our operations? John, you want to give us your insight?
Yeah, sure. The first one, and I've had the opportunity to go around the country in the last couple of years and talk to a lot of groups of people in and around a similar type of topic. And the first thing I always talk with folks about is that we really got to acknowledge that the system we have today isn't working. And that sounds harsh, and people go, but we put a lot of good buildings in place. We do. We employ a lot of people. That's great. But if you go back to that productivity chart, our industry is not making the type of progress it could, and it's not making the kind of progress all the other industrial segments need us to in construction to be able to keep the overall economy moving forward. So first step is always you got to acknowledge that what you're doing today isn't broken if you want to try to really make systemic change. And then the second part of that, obviously, is as we've talked all the way through in all the examples today, the only way I can see that we can make that system better that we have today is by working together. And then the second bullet is just about there are a lot of folks who have applied great technology in many industries that we could leverage. And again, if we pull together to leverage that and quit hiding behind what I will call every project is unique, construction is unique, this will never work in our industry. Well, it would never work in manufacturing or transportation or farming until they decided to get behind it and start working on solutions as an industry. And so I really believe that there is a lot we can learn from and apply from what other industries have. And as Ken started the material with today, this is really a huge inflection point because we don't have the skilled workforce. We've got a lot of folks retiring. Now is a tremendous opportunity by which we can really leverage technology to help us make up for that we can't just throw more people at it. Back to you, Kip.
John, great points. And just reiterating what you stated, really this construction is a team sport, guys and girls. There's no one person who can get everything done themselves. And if we put all our brains and all our backs together, we're that much more stronger of a unit in the industry.
Yeah, I
Chris,
think one of the biggest things that John said is, we tend to hide behind this mask of construction is unique and, nobody else does anything the way that we do. But I think we need to kind of put that aside and look at what other industries are doing. You're starting to see actually some non-construction people come into the construction industry and do things in different ways because they're not held by the way that construction has always been done because they don't know those rules. And there's some companies definitely disrupting the way that things are getting built and getting done. On my side, I think making a technology a priority is very important, but I think you focus on the people side of that really understand what it is your folks, your people in the field, your people in the office really need, and what solutions they need, rather than just going out and looking for solutions that you think are solving a problem. Understand the problems that they have and focus on the people and training those people, because you can have the best technology solution in the world, and if you don't actually train the folks and get them to buy in on it, it will never succeed. And a lot of people, tell me very often, oh, well, Chris, that works great for the big guys out there, the top 20, E&R contractors, because they've got all the budget in the world. Well, I can tell you, I'm not a top 20. I'm somewhere in the top 400 probably. I don't know. But we don't have a huge budget. And so at least budget something and get creative on how you can use that budget and how you can make the most of it. Do small pilots, work with companies. They will get you up and running on solutions for a lower cost to get it working on the first project, so you can prove an ROI that will allow you to then take that and scale it across your organization. And that's really important. If you're willing to put in, kind of the blood, sweat, and tears to work on these efforts, I think you can make the budget stretch a lot farther than you think you can, and really start to see some value out of it, and get some value for your folks out in the field and make their lives a little bit easier by providing them the solutions that they really need. And then, Kip, you want to talk a little bit more about how to support our teams out in the field?
Yeah, Chris, that's some great points, and it's really spot on to the field perspective that I'm going to go into right now. And I want each of you at home and each of you listening to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, am I working the best way that I can, or am I just doing it this way because I've always done it this way? I was trained to do it this way. Because at the end of the day, folks, we have a real problem in our industry. And until we realize that each of us have some responsibility for solving that, it's not going to happen. We got to stop coming up with excuses of why things can't be done a certain way, why we can't get a piece of technology, why we can't get a piece of software or hardware. We just got to make it happen. Because if I gave the excuse to an owner, to the executive, that I can't do something, they're going to find somebody who can. So we need to work together and just make things happen. That's what our industry is founded on. And sometimes we lose sight of that. We have to lead our teams, guide your people, inspire them to solve these tough questions. Don't be managers, don't be supervisors, but truly inspire and lead. And never forget that KISS principle. When technology integration, we have to keep it simple, stupid, otherwise we're all going to fail. What is the status of the industry in the next 5 years? Industry will grow, will continue to be hard to find workers. We'll make the technology solutions discussed here very critical. Patterns are going to change, denser housing climates, weather, disasters. We got to make sure that we're competitive, that we're completing projects, that we're working smarter and harder in these systems. Ken, you want to give us some insight?
Well, I think two things are really important to keep in mind. First, changing demographics. We've had decades in which the labor force was growing by about 1% a year. That isn't going to be the reality for the foreseeable future. We have almost as many people hitting retirement age now as we have people born in this country who are reaching employable age. So we are more and more dependent either on filling those ranks with foreign-born workers or with replacing workers with technology. Second, we have to keep in mind that the entire built environment is likely to change. Sure, we'll still live in housing, but more of us are going to be choosing or be forced to stay in rental housing, in multifamily housing, in urban settings, or in city-like suburbs. We'll still be going to work. Those of us who work in offices, we're going to find our office space shrinking. We're going to spend more of the time working out of the office, whether it's from a coffee shop, our car, or from our home. The transportation networks are going to change. As a bicyclist, I'm happy that cities are paying more attention and providing bike lanes and better options, better safety. But also, it does show that even roads aren't the same as what they used to be, and the vehicles on them certainly are going to be changing in terms of how they're used, who's driving them, whether it's even a person driving them, and how far we're going. So all kinds of facilities are going to change, and for contractors to keep up with these demographic and land use changes clearly requires a nimbleness and a flexibility that I think only technology can provide. And that's not even addressing the challenges that we're going to face from severe weather and perhaps permanent climate change.
Ken, thank you very much. It was some great insight. I'm going to recap here a little bit and go over some of our key takeaways. The challenges are real. Our industry, there's no doubt, is if we continue doing the same things we've always done, we're only going to continue to hurt ourselves, hurt our clients, and hurt the American economy. We know there are better ways to build things, smarter ways. We can innovate new technologies, new systems, new products into the built environment to make it better for everyone involved. Teamwork and collaboration, we all agree that together we're stronger, smarter, faster than as an individual. Technology in the field, as well as the office, is the way everything is going. The days of the plan tables with thousands and thousands of sheets of documents and 4 and 5 plan clerks are over. You have this integrated technology approach to getting the information out to the folks executing the work. I told one of my executives at one time, when you're analyzing somebody for a hiring perspective, you look at 2 things. I call it E plus E, education plus experience. But both those things equal one thing. It equals I, information. So if you're able to augment I without a full sum in either of the 2 E's, we all win. Focus on your people. Make their job easier. Everyone knows that we have a rough industry. It's tough. It's tough to attract new talent. It wears people out. It's not an easy environment. So let's work smarter together as an industry so that we can make it better for everyone and make it better for our kids who are going to come up and do this. Remember, be a leader. Don't just sit back. Everyone listening has taken some ownership to realize that they have to integrate technology to help our industry. This is a team effort. I want to thank everyone. I hope those of you folks listening at home gained some important information. I know I really did and really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us.